r/MaliciousCompliance. He said prove you love me, so I objected at his wedding. The church doors felt heavier than they should have as I pushed them open, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. 200 pairs of eyes didn't turn toward me yet. They were all focused on the altar where Marcus stood in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking every inch the devoted groom. If only they knew. I slipped into the back pew as quietly as possible, smoothing down my black dress, yes, black, because I was here to mourn something. The death of 3 years of my life, maybe. Or just the death of my naivety. Do you, Marcus James Whitfield, take Vivian Elizabeth Pemberton to be your lawfully wedded wife? The officiant's voice boomed through the cathedral, and I watched Marcus's face as he prepared to lie in front of God and everyone. Just like he'd been lying to me for months. I do. Liar. My fingers tightened around the manila envelope in my lap. 3 months of detective work condensed into damning evidence. Photos of us together from our anniversary dinner just 6 weeks ago, the same night he'd whispered I love you while she was apparently already picking out wedding dresses. Text messages where he called me his forever girl while simultaneously planning his future with someone else. Credit card receipts showing he'd been living a double life so elaborate it would make a spy jealous. Do you, Vivian Elizabeth Pemberton, take Marcus James Whitfield to be your lawfully wedded husband? The bride, because let's be honest, that's what she was, even when I thought I was his girlfriend, practically glowed as she said, I do. I wondered if she knew. Did Vivian have any idea that her precious fiancé had been sleeping in my bed, eating breakfast at my kitchen table, and meeting my parents just 3 months ago? Or was she as clueless as I'd been when his college friend accidentally mentioned the engagement at a coffee shop, looking mortified when I stared at him in confusion? If there is anyone present who can show just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. This was it. My moment. The moment Marcus had unknowingly given me when he'd laughed in my face during our final confrontation. When I begged him to explain, to help me understand how 3 years could mean nothing, he'd smirked and said, if you really loved me, you'd prove it instead of just whining about it. Prove it. Oh, Marcus. You have no idea what you just asked for. I stood up slowly, the rustling of my dress unnaturally loud in the sacred silence. A few heads turned, confusion rippling through the back rows like a stone dropped in still water. Actually, I said, my voice carrying farther than I'd expected in the vaulted space, I can show just cause. The ripple became a wave. Heads swiveled, whispers erupted, and at the altar, Marcus went white as his boutonniere. His eyes found mine across the sea of shocked faces, and I saw the exact moment he realized what was happening. What I was about to do. I smiled and held up the envelope. I have quite a lot to say, actually. The silence that followed was deafening. You know that moment in movies where everything goes quiet except for a dramatic heartbeat? This was nothing like that. This was 200 people collectively holding their breath while the pipe organ seemed to wheeze in the background. Marcus's face cycled through emotions like a broken slot machine, shock, fear, anger, then something that looked almost like relief. That threw me for a second. Relief wasn't what I'd expected. Ma'am, the officiant said, his voice strained with the kind of politeness reserved for defusing bombs and talking down crazy people. Perhaps we could discuss this privately after the ceremony? Oh, I don't think so, I replied, taking a step into the aisle. See, Marcus here specifically asked me to prove my love for him. And I'm nothing if not thorough when it comes to keeping promises. The bride, Vivian, finally turned around fully, and I got my first good look at her. She was stunning, obviously. Tall, blonde, the kind of bone structure that screamed old money and good breeding. But there was something else in her face as she looked at me. Not confusion. Not shock. Recognition. That stopped me cold for a moment. She knew. She knew about me. Vivian, darling, why don't you sit down? Marcus's mother, I recognized her from the society photos I'd googled, appeared at the bride's elbow like she'd materialized from thin air. Mrs. Whitfield was the kind of woman who probably had crisis management protocols memorized. This is obviously some sort of misunderstanding. Is it though? I asked, opening the envelope and pulling out the first photo. It was from our trip to Napa last month, Marcus's arm around my waist as we stood in front of some vineyard, both of us laughing at something the photographer had said. Because this was taken 5 weeks ago. Right around the time you were sending out wedding invitations, I believe. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by the distinctive sound of 200 people trying to whisper at once. Security, someone hissed from the front row, probably Marcus's father. But this was a church, not a country club. The only security was whatever faith people had put in Marcus's character, and I was systematically demolishing that. Marcus finally found his voice. Sarah, please. Don't do this. Don't do what? I asked, genuine curiosity coloring my tone. Don't prove that I love you? But you specifically asked me to. I remember your exact words, actually. You said if I really loved you, I'd prove it instead of just whining about it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a voice memo. Would you like me to play the recording? The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. You recorded me? I recorded everything, Marcus. Turns out 3 years of loving someone makes you really good at remembering the important moments. Like when they tell you about their childhood dog, or their favorite breakfast, or when they systematically destroy your entire sense of reality. Vivian stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice was crystal clear and carried the kind of authority that came from years of finishing schools and board meetings. What exactly are you claiming? Finally. A direct question from someone who wasn't trying to manage or dismiss me. I'm claiming that your husband-to-be has been living with me for the past year while planning this wedding. I'm claiming that he told me he loved me 6 weeks ago. And I'm claiming that I have documentation to prove all of it. The whispers stopped. Even the organ seemed to hold its breath. Vivian looked at Marcus, then back at me, and smiled. Good, she said. It's about time someone did. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. I'm sorry, what? I stared at Vivian, who was still smiling that eerily calm smile while her wedding dress pulled around her like spilled cream. You heard me correctly, she said, turning to face Marcus fully. I've been waiting months for someone to call you out on this charade. Marcus looked like he was about to vomit all over his Italian leather shoes. Vivian, I can explain. Can you? She interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Can you explain why your girlfriend has been posting pictures of your shared apartment on Instagram for the past 8 months? Can you explain why she tagged you in a Valentine's Day post calling you the love of her life while you were picking out engagement rings with me? The church erupted in chaos. Whispers became voices, voices became shouts, and somewhere in the front row, I was pretty sure Marcus's grandmother was fanning herself with a program. I stood there holding my envelope of evidence, suddenly feeling like I'd brought a knife to a nuclear war. Wait, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. You knew about me this whole time? Honey, Vivian said, and there was something almost pitying in her tone. I've known about you since month 2. Did you really think someone could maintain 2 completely separate lives without leaving digital footprints everywhere? My brain was struggling to process this. Then why? Why was I marrying him anyway? Vivian's laugh was sharp and bitter. Because, dear Sarah, oh yes, I know your name too, some of us understand that marriage isn't always about love. Sometimes it's about business. Sometimes it's about preserving family legacies and financial empires. She gestured around the cathedral, at the flowers that probably cost more than my car, at the guests dripping with jewelry and designer clothing. The Whitfield and Pemberton families have been planning this union for years. Our fathers went to Yale together. Our trust funds are basically siblings. Marcus and I have known since we were teenagers that we'd probably end up married. But I started. Medieval? Probably. But it's also practical. She turned back to Marcus, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. What I didn't account for was my future husband being stupid enough to fall in love with someone else and thinking he could have both. The officiant cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should postpone. Oh, we're not postponing anything, Marcus's father said, stepping forward. Richard Whitfield was the kind of man who probably owned senators as a hobby. This is clearly some sort of extortion attempt. Actually, Dad, just stop. Marcus finally spoke up, and his voice was hollow. She's not lying. About any of it. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I've been living with Sarah for a year, he continued, each word sounding like it was being dragged out of him. I love her. I've loved her for 3 years. But I'm also completely financially dependent on this family, and this marriage comes with a $10 million trust fund that I can't access any other way. Vivian nodded like he'd just confirmed the weather forecast. See? Practical concerns. I felt like I was losing my mind. So you're all just okay with this? You're going to get married anyway? That was the plan, Vivian said. Until you decided to make a scene. Which, honestly, I respect. I've been wondering how long it would take you to figure it out. Figure what out? That you've been the other woman this entire time. The words hit me like a physical blow. Because she was right. While I'd been thinking I was his girlfriend and she was some secret from his past, the truth was exactly the opposite. She was his real life. I was just his escape from it. The weight of her words settled over me like a lead blanket. I was the other woman. In my own story, I was the villain. No, I said, shaking my head. No, that's not. I didn't know about any of this. He never told me he was engaged. He told me he loved me. He said whatever he needed to say to keep you around, Vivian finished, not unkindly. Men like Marcus are very good at compartmentalizing. Aren't you, darling? Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. Vivian, please. Please what? Please don't tell the truth? Please keep pretending that this arrangement was working? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. It stopped working the moment you fell in love with her, you absolute fool. I didn't mean for that to happen, Marcus said, and for the first time since I'd walked into this cathedral, he looked directly at me. Sarah, I swear I never meant for you to get hurt. But you knew I would, I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. When you told me to prove my love for you, you knew this would destroy me. You were counting on me being too heartbroken to do anything about it. I was trying to protect you, he said desperately. If you knew about all this, about my family, about what was expected of me, you would have told her to run, came a new voice from the crowd. A woman in an emerald green dress stood up in the third row, elegant and poised despite the chaos around us. Just like you told me. Every head in the cathedral swiveled toward her. Marcus went absolutely white. Oh, for fuck's sake, Vivian muttered, and hearing her curse in that crystal clear finishing school accent was somehow the most surreal part of this entire nightmare. How many of them are there, Marcus? The woman in green stepped into the aisle, and I could see she was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair and the kind of confidence that came from surviving something terrible. I'm Jennifer Morrison. I was with Marcus for 2 years, ending about 4 months before he met you, she said to me. He told me he loved me too. Right up until his parents reminded him about his obligations to Vivian. Jennifer, don't, Marcus pleaded. Don't what? Don't tell her the truth? Don't let her know that this is a pattern? Jennifer's voice carried across the church like a bell. He's not going to leave her, Sarah. He's never going to choose you. Because Marcus Whitfield has never made a single decision in his life that wasn't approved by his trust fund. The crowd was riveted now. This wasn't just a wedding objection anymore, it was turning into a public trial, and Marcus was being convicted by his own history. That's enough, Richard Whitfield boomed, stepping forward with a kind of authority that probably moved Marcus. Security will escort all of you out, and we'll continue with the ceremony. What security? The officiant asked nervously. This is a house of God, not a private event space. Then call the police, Mrs. Whitfield demanded, materializing beside her husband like they were a tag team of damage control. This is harassment. Of whom? Jennifer shot back. Your son? For what? Telling the truth about his behavior. I stood there holding my envelope of useless evidence, watching this surreal scene unfold around me. 3 years of my life, reduced to a subplot in someone else's family drama. But something was crystallizing in my chest, something harder and clearer than the grief I'd carried here. You know what? I said, loud enough to cut through the arguing. You're right. All of you. Marcus was never going to choose me. The cathedral fell silent again. But that doesn't mean I have to make it easy for him. I reached into my envelope and pulled out a single photograph, the one I'd taken just 2 weeks ago of Marcus asleep in my bed, wearing the t-shirt I bought him for his birthday. The morning light streaming through my apartment windows, his face peaceful and content. The face of a man who looked nothing like the cornered animal standing at this altar. You want to talk about proof of love? I said, holding up the photo so the front rows could see it. This was taken 14 days ago. The morning after he told me he was ready to start looking for apartments together. Marcus's face crumpled. Sarah, please. Please what? Please don't mention that you've been apartment hunting with your side piece while planning your wedding? I pulled out another photo. Or maybe I shouldn't mention that you signed a lease? Oh yes, Marcus. The lease you signed on Tuesday. For the 1-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights. The one where we were supposed to start our life together. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Vivian looked stunned. You signed a lease, she said slowly. 4 days ago? I can explain. You signed a lease, Vivian repeated, her voice climbing an octave, 4 days before our wedding? It's not what it sounds like, Marcus said desperately, but I was already pulling out my phone. Really? Because I have the email chain right here. Want me to read it out loud? The part where you told the landlord you were excited to start this new chapter with your girlfriend? I looked up at 200 faces staring back at me. That would be me, by the way. The girlfriend. Jennifer laughed, actually laughed. Oh, Marcus. You absolute disaster. This is insane, Mrs. Whitfield hissed. Vivian, surely you're not going to let some delusional girl. Delusional? Vivian's voice cut through her future mother-in-law's words like ice. She has documentation. Time-stamped photos. Lease agreements. What I have is a fiancé who was apparently planning to set up house with another woman while honeymooning with me in Tuscany. The crowd was restless now, people pulling out phones, probably texting or posting to social media. The Whitfield family's perfect wedding was becoming a viral scandal in real time. There's more, I said, because apparently I had completely lost my mind. Marcus, do you want to tell them about the conversation we had last Sunday? About starting a family? If I thought he'd looked sick before, now he looked like he was actively dying. You did not, Vivian said, her composure finally cracking. We talked about names, I continued ruthlessly. You said you'd always loved the name Charlotte for a girl. Said it sounded like someone who could change the world. That's my grandmother's name, Vivian whispered. Marcus's knees actually buckled. And the ring, I said, reaching into my purse one more time. You know, the promise ring you gave me last month? I held it up, and the diamond caught the cathedral light, sending sparkles across the stone walls. It wasn't huge, but it was real, and it was beautiful, and according to Marcus, it had been his grandmother's. Oh my god, someone in the crowd gasped. Is that the Whitfield emerald? Marcus's grandmother stood up so fast her program went flying. That's my mother's ring. It's been missing from the estate jewelry for months. The cathedral erupted again. But this time, the chaos felt different. Sharper. Because we'd moved past infidelity and family drama into something that looked suspiciously like theft. And from the look on Richard Whitfield's face, we were about to enter an entirely new level of catastrophe. Marcus Edmund Whitfield, his grandmother's voice rang out like the crack of a whip. You will explain this instant how my mother's engagement ring is on that woman's finger. The entire cathedral seemed to hold its breath. I looked down at the ring on my finger, the one Marcus had slipped on during a picnic in Central Park just 5 weeks ago, telling me it had been his great-grandmother's, that he wanted me to have it as a promise of our future together. Grandmother, I can explain, Marcus started, but she was already making her way down the aisle with surprising speed for someone who had to be 90. That ring, she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me, is a family heirloom. It belonged to my mother, Evelyn Whitfield, and it has never left the family vault except for, she stopped dead, her face going pale. Except for when we had it cleaned and appraised 3 months ago for the estate insurance. Richard Whitfield's face had gone from red to purple. Marcus, tell me you did not steal from your own family to give jewelry to your mistress. She's not my mistress. Marcus exploded, finally showing some emotion beyond panic. God, you make it sound so sordid. I love her. The words hung in the air like a confession at a murder trial. Vivian stood perfectly still at the altar, her bouquet trembling in her hands. You love her, she repeated flatly. That's not, I mean. You love her, Vivian said again, and her voice was getting stronger, clearer. You stole your great-grandmother's ring to give to a woman you love, while planning to marry me for my trust fund. It's not about the money, Marcus said desperately. Vivian, you know it's not that simple. Actually, came another voice from the crowd, it's exactly that simple. I turned to see a man in an expensive suit standing up in the back section, someone I didn't recognize but who clearly knew the family from the way Mrs. Whitfield's face went white. Charles, she hissed. Don't you dare. But Charles was already walking down the aisle, pulling out his phone. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Charles Morrison, Jennifer's brother, and coincidentally, the estate attorney for the Whitfield Family Trust. He held up his phone. And I have some very interesting information about the terms of Marcus's inheritance. This is a family matter, Richard boomed, but Charles ignored him. According to the trust documents that Marcus signed 6 months ago, his access to the family fortune is contingent on marriage to an appropriate partner before his 27th birthday. Charles looked around the cathedral with a lawyer's flair for drama. That birthday is next month. And the definition of appropriate partner was specifically written to describe Vivian Montgomery's family background and social standing. The crowd was eating this up now. People were openly filming, and I could see the panic in Mrs. Whitfield's eyes as she realized this was going to be all over society blogs within the hour. But here's the interesting part, Charles continued. If Marcus fails to meet these conditions, or if he's found to have violated the moral character clause, which includes theft of family property, his inheritance doesn't just disappear. It goes to charity. All of it. Including his father's stake in the family business. Richard Whitfield looked like he was about to have a stroke. Charles, if you think you can use this circus to what? Expose the truth? Charles smiled coldly. Marcus didn't just steal a ring, folks. By giving away a documented family heirloom without permission, he's technically committed grand larceny against his own trust. Which means he just forfeited approximately $47 million. Marcus swayed on his feet. That can't be right. Oh, but it is, Charles said cheerfully. I should know. I wrote the clause myself. The cathedral erupted into complete chaos, and somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized I was still wearing a stolen ring and had somehow become the key witness in a $47 million family implosion. And that's when the police sirens started. I don't know who called them, maybe hotel security, maybe a concerned guest who heard the shouting from the street, but the sound of approaching sirens cut through the cathedral chaos like a knife through butter. "Oh, this is perfect," Jennifer said, clapping slowly from her pew. "Absolutely perfect." Mrs. Whitfield was frantically whispering into her phone, probably calling every lawyer she had on speed dial, while Richard looked like he was calculating exactly how much damage control was going to cost. Vivian hadn't moved from the altar, still clutching her bouquet, staring at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. "Sarah," Marcus said, turning to me with desperate eyes, "you have to tell them. Tell them I didn't steal it. Tell them it was a gift, that I had permission." "Did you?" I asked simply. "Did you have permission?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "Because I specifically remember you telling me it belonged to your late great-grandmother. You said your grandmother wanted you to have it for the woman you'd marry someday." I looked toward the very much alive grandmother in question, who was now being supported by 2 ushers but still managing to look murderous. Funny how that story changes when there are witnesses. "You little," Mrs. Whitfield started toward me, but Charles stepped smoothly into her path. "I wouldn't finish that sentence if I were you, Eleanor. This young woman is technically the victim of theft by deception. I'd be very careful about threatening her in front of 200 witnesses." The sirens were getting closer, and I could see Marcus starting to panic in a way that went beyond social embarrassment. This was real legal trouble, and everyone knew it. "We need to handle this quietly," Richard said, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to making problems disappear with checkbooks. "Sarah, is it? I'm sure we can come to some arrangement. Are you attempting to bribe a witness?" Charles asked with obvious delight. "In a house of worship, no less? Richard, you're making this so much worse than it needs to be. She's the one who created this mess." Mrs. Whitfield shrieked. "Coming here with her little revenge plot, disrupting a sacred ceremony." "Actually," came a new voice from the back of the cathedral, "she's doing exactly what she was asked to do." Everyone turned to see an elderly man in priest's robes walking down the center aisle. Not the officiant, this was someone older, with white hair and kind eyes that nevertheless held a steely determination. "Father Mackenzie," Vivian whispered. "I've been listening from the vestry," Father Mackenzie said calmly, "and I feel I should point out that when I asked if anyone had reason these two should not be wed, this young woman provided several very compelling reasons. Including documentation." He looked around the cathedral with the moral authority of someone who'd probably officiated at hundreds of weddings and knew a disaster when he saw one. "In 50 years of performing marriage ceremonies," he continued, "I've never had someone object with actual evidence of ongoing deception and theft. Usually it's just old flames making dramatic gestures." The police sirens were right outside now, and I could hear car doors slamming. "This isn't over," Mrs. Whitfield hissed at me. "No," I said, finally finding my voice again. "It's really not. Because Marcus asked me to prove I loved him. And I'm just getting started." The cathedral doors opened, and 3 police officers walked in to find 200 wedding guests, 1 potentially bigamous groom, a stolen family heirloom, and me, apparently the most dangerous woman in Manhattan. The lead officer, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, surveyed the scene with the expression of someone who'd seen everything and was professionally unimpressed by Manhattan drama. "We got a call about a disturbance," she said, her voice cutting through the whispers. "Someone want to explain why I got 3 units responding to St. Patrick's Cathedral?" Officer, Richard Whitfield stepped forward, automatically assuming he'd take control. "This is a private family matter that got a bit heated. Nothing that requires police intervention." "Actually," Charles interrupted, still holding his phone, "I believe grand larceny requires police intervention. This young woman is in possession of stolen property valued at over $50,000. The officer's eyebrows went up. "Is that so?" My hand instinctively went to the ring, and I realized I was still wearing evidence of a felony. "I didn't know it was stolen," I said quickly. "He told me it was his to give." "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step over here," the officer said, not unkindly but with clear authority. "And sir," she looked at Marcus, "you too." "This is ridiculous," Marcus said, but his voice cracked. "I'm a Whitfield. I don't steal from my own family." "Technically," his grandmother said acidly, "you're not a Whitfield anymore. According to Charles, you just forfeited that right along with everything that comes with it." The second officer was already taking notes, and I could see the third one trying to corral the crowd of guests who were openly filming everything. This was going to be viral within hours. "Ma'am," the lead officer said to me, "I'm going to need that ring as evidence." My fingers froze on the band. After everything Marcus had put me through, this ring had become a symbol of finally getting the truth. Giving it up felt like losing the only proof I had that any of it mattered. "Can I swallowed hard. "Can I make a statement first?" "Sarah, don't say anything without a lawyer," Charles called out. "Richard's already calculating how to spin this." "She doesn't need a lawyer," Marcus said desperately. "This is all a misunderstanding. Sarah, tell them we were together. Tell them about our relationship." The officer looked between us with growing interest. "So you two know each other?" "We dated for 3 years," I said. "Until I found out he was engaged to someone else." Vivian made a sound like she'd been slapped, and I realized she still didn't know the full scope of Marcus's deception. She'd been standing there like a statue, but now she was looking at me with something that might have been recognition. 3 years, she whispered. "The whole time he was supposedly rebuilding your relationship," I confirmed. "He was living with me. We had vacation plans. I helped him pick out." I gestured helplessly at the cathedral. "I helped him plan this wedding, thinking it was for us someday." "You lying piece of—" Vivian started toward Marcus, but her maid of honor caught her arm. "Ma'am," the officer said to Vivian, "were you aware of this relationship?" "I was aware he was seeing someone casually," Vivian said, her voice getting sharper with each word. "He said it was over. He said she was just some girl from work who couldn't handle that he was committed to me." "Some girl from work?" I repeated, feeling a familiar rage building. "I'm a senior project manager at Morrison & Associates. I make more in a year than most people see in 5. And I was never just casual to him." "Morrison & Associates," the officer repeated, writing. Any relation to? She looked at Charles. My sister's firm, Charles confirmed. She's been there 6 years. Excellent reputation. The family was realizing I wasn't just some random woman Marcus had picked up. I had connections, credentials, and now I had witnesses who could verify everything I'd said. And Marcus was finally understanding that his perfect plan was completely, irreversibly destroyed. Ms. Chen, the officer said, reading from her notepad, you said you helped plan this wedding. Can you elaborate on that? I glanced at Marcus, who had gone pale. I helped him research venues. I made spreadsheets comparing catering options. I even helped him pick out. I gestured to his boutonniere. Those flowers. He said his fiancée was too busy with work to handle the details. That's not, Marcus started, but Vivian cut him off. Too busy? Her voice was deadly quiet. Marcus, I planned every detail of this wedding myself. I spent 8 months coordinating with vendors, choosing flowers, tastings. Oh God, I breathed, the pieces clicking together. You were planning 2 different weddings. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the guests who'd been whispering stopped to stare. 2 weddings, the officer repeated. He kept talking about backup plans, I said, my voice getting stronger. Alternate venues, different dates. He said he wanted options in case something fell through. I looked at Marcus, who was now visibly sweating. But you weren't planning backups. You were planning to marry whoever seemed like the better option. That's insane, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Charles pulled out his phone again. Because I have some very interesting emails here. Marcus, you sent a deposit to the Plaza Hotel for next weekend. Same florist, same caterer. Even the same photographer. The collective gasp from the wedding party was audible. Next weekend? Vivian's bouquet hit the floor. Marcus, next weekend is when I'm supposed to be on our honeymoon. You were going to marry me next Saturday, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. At the plaza. You had 2 weddings planned to 2 different women 1 week apart. The lead officer looked up from her notepad. Sir, I'm going to need you to explain these allegations. This is a setup, Marcus said wildly, looking around for support. She's obsessed with me. She can't accept that our relationship is over, so she's making things up. The deposits are real, Marcus, Charles said coldly. 50,000 to the plaza. 25 to the same florist you used here. All charged to the credit card connected to your trust fund. Mrs. Whitfield grabbed her husband's arm. Richard, tell me he didn't. Eleanor, don't say anything, Richard warned, but his face had gone ashen. Actually, came a new voice from the crowd, I can verify some of this. Everyone turned to see a young woman in a bridesmaid dress stepping forward. She was holding her phone, and her expression was grim. I'm sorry, Vivian, she said. But I've been trying to tell you something for weeks. I saw him with her. Multiple times. At restaurants, coming out of her apartment building. I thought maybe it was just. I didn't know how to tell you. Jessica, Vivian whispered. Why didn't you? Because I figured if he was cheating, it would come out eventually. I never thought. She gestured helplessly at me. I never thought he was planning to marry her too. This is getting complicated, the second officer muttered. It gets worse, I said, pulling out my phone. Because I have text messages from him as recently as yesterday. Confirming our wedding plans for next weekend. Telling me how excited he was to finally make it official. I held up my phone, and even from a distance, people could see the message thread. Can't wait to marry the woman I actually love, I read aloud. Tomorrow is just business, but next week is real. The sound Vivian made was barely human. And that's when Marcus ran. He made it exactly 12 steps before the third officer tackled him. Really? The lead officer said dryly as Marcus hit the cathedral steps. Running from police at your own wedding? That's a new one. The tackle sent Marcus's boutonniere, the one I'd helped him choose, skittering across the stone. Watching him get handcuffed in his $1,000 tuxedo should have felt like victory, but all I felt was hollow. This is assault. Richard Whitfield bellowed, finally finding his voice. That's my son. You can't just. Sir, your son just fled from questioning regarding multiple felony allegations, the officer replied calmly. Running suggests consciousness of guilt. He was probably just overwhelmed, Mrs. Whitfield said weakly, but even she sounded like she didn't believe it. Charles was still scrolling through his phone. There's more, he announced. Marcus, you booked the honeymoon suite at the Four Seasons for next weekend too. Different name on the reservation. He looked up at me. Sarah Chan, I presume? My stomach lurched. The romantic getaway he'd been planning for months, I whispered. He kept saying it would be perfect, that we'd finally have time to talk about our future. While I, Vivian said, her voice getting dangerously quiet, was supposed to be in Tuscany. On what I thought was our honeymoon. She turned to look at Marcus, who was now being helped to his feet in handcuffs. You were going to send me to Italy alone while you honeymooned with her? Vivian, I can explain, Marcus started. Explain what? She exploded. Explain how you've been living a double life for 3 years? Explain how you proposed to me while you were already planning to propose to someone else? Explain how you looked me in the eye this morning and promised to love only me while you had another woman's ring in your pocket? The ring. My hand went to it automatically, and I realized everyone was staring at me again. Ma'am, the lead officer said, I still need that ring as evidence. Wait, Jessica called out, her phone still in her hand. There's something else. I've been going through my photos from the engagement party, and... She swiped through her screen. Marcus, you were on the phone during Vivian's speech. I thought you were just checking work messages, but... She held up her phone, zooming in on a photo. Even from where I stood, I could see Marcus in the background, his face lit by his phone screen. The timestamp on this photo is 8:47 p.m. on March 15th, Jessica continued. The same night as your engagement party, Vivian. And look what he's typing. She read from the screen, missing you tonight. Wish you were here instead. Sent to someone named my real love with a heart emoji. The wedding guests were starting to murmur again, phones coming out to capture every moment of this disaster. That's my contact name in his phone, I said quietly. He changed it to that 6 months ago. 6 months ago, Charles repeated, checking his notes. Right around the time you got engaged to Vivian. How romantic. Mrs. Whitfield was now openly crying, her carefully applied makeup streaming down her cheeks. Marcus, how could you do this? How could you embarrass our family like this? I think the bigger question, the officer said, is how many laws he's broken doing it. Wire fraud, if he used family money for both weddings. Theft, obviously. Potentially bigamy, if both ceremonies had gone through. Is that even possible? Vivian asked. Can someone actually get married twice? Not legally, the officer replied. But if he'd gone through with both ceremonies, both women would have thought they were legally married. That's fraud on a whole different level. And that's when the reporters showed up. The first news van pulled up just as Marcus was being loaded into the police car, followed immediately by 2 more. Someone in the crowd must have tipped them off, or maybe the police scanners had picked up disrupted wedding at St. Matthew's Cathedral and they'd smelled blood in the water. Oh God, Vivian breathed, watching the reporters pour out with cameras and microphones. This is going to be everywhere. She was right. The Whitfield name meant something in the city. Old money, charity galas, society pages, this wasn't just a cheating scandal. This was front page material. Miss. A reporter with perfectly blown out hair was already pushing through the crowd toward me. Channel 7 News. Can you tell us about your relationship with Marcus Whitfield? No comment, I said automatically, but it was too late. The cameras were rolling, capturing me in my red dress, still holding the engagement ring that was supposed to be evidence. Is it true you objected at his wedding? Another reporter called out. Are you the other woman? She's not the other woman, Vivian said sharply, stepping beside me. If anyone's the other woman here, it's me. The reporters swarmed toward her like sharks scenting blood. Miss Morrison. How does it feel to discover your fiancé was planning to marry someone else? Were you aware of the relationship? Will you be pressing charges? Charles appeared at my other side, creating a barrier between us and the cameras. Ladies, I'd suggest we move inside before this gets worse. But it was already worse. I could see more news vans pulling up, and someone had apparently leaked to social media because half the wedding guests now had their phones out, live streaming the chaos. Sarah Chen, right? A different reporter had flanked us, coming up from the cathedral steps. Our research shows you work at Hartwell and Associates downtown. How long have you been planning to disrupt this wedding? I didn't plan anything, I snapped, then immediately regretted engaging. I just wanted answers. What kind of answers? The kind where someone explains why they proposed to me while engaged to someone else. The words hung in the air, and I watched at least 3 reporters' eyes light up. That soundbite was going to be everywhere by evening. You said he proposed to you? The first reporter pressed. When was this? I'm not answering any more questions, I said, but my hands were shaking. This was spiraling completely out of control. Miss Morrison, another reporter had cornered Vivian. Sources say your family's trust fund was financing both wedding ceremonies. Did you know your money was being used to pay for your fiancé's other relationship? Vivian's face went white. What did you just say? Oh no. In all the chaos, no one had actually explained the financial details to her yet. Charles stepped forward quickly. That's unconfirmed. It's not unconfirmed, Richard Whitfield's voice cut through the crowd. He was standing at the top of the cathedral steps, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. The Morrison Family Trust has been paying for Marcus's expenses for the past 2 years. Including, apparently, his romantic expenses. The silence that followed was deafening. Daddy? Vivian's voice was very small. Your fiancé, Richard continued, his voice carrying over the crowd, has been systematically defrauding your family while planning to commit bigamy. The Whitfield family had no knowledge of the scheme. I watched Vivian's face crumble as the implications hit her. Not only had Marcus been cheating and planning 2 weddings, he'd been using her family's money to do it. The reporters were having a field day. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear more sirens approaching. The sirens belonged to federal agents. FBI, the lead agent announced, flashing his badge as he approached our chaotic scene. We're here about the wire fraud investigation. My blood turned to ice. Wire fraud investigation? This is about more than just a cheating boyfriend, Agent Rodriguez explained to the crowd of reporters, police, and wedding guests. We've been tracking suspicious financial transactions through the Morrison Family Trust for 6 months. Vivian grabbed my arm. Sarah, did you know about this? Know about what? But even as I asked, pieces were clicking into place. Marcus's sudden expensive gifts. The way he'd upgraded everything in his life over the past year. The designer clothes, the new car, the apartment in the expensive part of town. Mr. Marcus Whitfield, Agent Rodriguez continued, is suspected of defrauding the Morrison Family Trust of approximately $1.2 million over the past 18 months. The number hit the crowd like a physical blow. I heard Mrs. Morrison, Vivian's mother, gasp from somewhere behind us. That's impossible, Vivian whispered. The trust has safeguards. He can't just. He can if he has your passwords, Agent Rodriguez said gently. And if he's been slowly transferring money to accounts under assumed names. My phone started buzzing. Then buzzing again. I glanced down and felt sick. Marcus was calling me. From jail. Don't answer that, Agent Rodriguez said sharply. In fact, I need everyone who's been in contact with Mr. Whitfield to preserve their phones for evidence. Evidence of what? Charles demanded. Wire fraud. Identity theft. Potentially money laundering. Agent Rodriguez looked directly at me. Miss Chen, we're going to need to speak with you extensively. Our records show multiple large purchases made in your name over the past year. The world tilted. In my name? The 4 Seasons reservation Charles mentioned? Paid for with a credit card issued to Sarah Chen. A card you never applied for. The reporters were frantically scribbling notes. This story was getting bigger by the minute. He stole my identity, I breathed. Oh God, he's been using my identity to hide his spending. Not just yours, Agent Rodriguez said grimly. We found accounts under at least 6 different names, all connected to people in his orbit. Friends, colleagues, family members of both women. Vivian's phone rang. She looked at it, confused. It's our bank. Don't answer, Agent Rodriguez warned. Miss Morrison, we believe your fiancé has been systematically emptying accounts connected to your family for over a year. The wedding expenses were just the tip of the iceberg. But I check our accounts, Vivian protested weakly. The account you know about, Agent Rodriguez clarified. We discovered he opened 17 additional accounts using information from both of your credit reports. My niece felt weak. 17? There's more. Agent Rodriguez pulled out a tablet. Miss Chen, did you authorize the purchase of a house in Portland last month? I've never been to Portland. Nevertheless, according to our records, you bought a $400,000 house there on February 14th, Valentine's Day. He showed me the screen. Deed is in your name, but the down payment came from the Morrison Trust. The math hit me like a truck. He was building an escape plan. A very elaborate one, Agent Rodriguez agreed. The house in Portland. Bank accounts in 3 states. A safety deposit box registered under your social security number but at a bank you've never visited. Vivian was staring at both of us in horror. How much did he steal? We're still calculating the total, but current estimates are approaching $2 million. Mrs. Morrison let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. The reporters were having Christmas morning. This wasn't just a love triangle anymore. This was a full-scale financial crime story involving old money families and federal investigations. And somehow, I was right in the middle of it. Miss Chen, Agent Rodriguez said, we're going to need you to come with us. Wait, I said, panic flooding my voice. Come with you where? Am I under arrest? Not at this time, Agent Rodriguez said carefully. But we need to process you as a potential victim of identity theft, and we also need to verify that you weren't a willing participant in the fraud scheme. The words hit me like a slap. You think I helped him? Miss Chen, you received significant financial benefits from this relationship. Designer gifts, expensive dinners, trips. I didn't know where the money came from. I protested, but even as I said it, I realized how naive it sounded. How could I not have suspected something when Marcus suddenly started spending like he'd won the lottery? Vivian stepped away from me, her face cold. Sarah, tell me the truth. Did you know he was using my family's money to spoil you? Of course not. But doubt was creeping in. The expensive restaurants Marcus insisted on. The weekend trip to Napa that seemed way beyond his salary. The way he'd brushed off my questions about his sudden financial upgrade with jokes about smart investments. The problem, Agent Rodriguez continued, is that some of these transactions required 2-factor authentication sent to your phone. Bank transfers, credit applications, we have records of confirmation codes being used. My mouth went dry. He had access to my phone sometimes. He said it was because his battery died, or he needed to make a call. How often did he use your phone, Miss Chen? I tried to remember. It had seemed innocent at the time. Marcus borrowing my phone to order dinner when his was charging. Using it to call an Uber when we were together. Asking me to check his emails when he was driving. Oh God, I whispered. He set up forwarding on my email, didn't he? He said it was so I wouldn't miss important messages when my phone died. Agent Rodriguez nodded grimly. We found an extensive digital footprint linking your devices to fraudulent accounts. Either you're an accomplice, or you're the victim of a very sophisticated manipulation. She's a victim, Charles said firmly. Anyone can see that. With respect, Mr. Ashworth. I'm Miss Morrison's attorney. Mr. Ashworth, financial crime investigations don't operate on what anyone can see. They operate on evidence. And right now, Miss Chen's digital footprint is all over this case. Another agent approached Rodriguez, whispering something in his ear. His expression darkened. What now? Vivian demanded. We just discovered that Mr. Whitfield attempted to transfer another $300,000 this morning. From jail. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. How was that even possible? He used automated transfers he set up months ago, Rodriguez explained. Triggered by specific dates and events. It appears your wedding day was programmed to initiate several large transactions. Vivian's face went ashen. He was planning to clean us out today? It gets worse. The transfers were going to accounts linked to airline tickets. 3 different flights leaving the country tomorrow under 3 different names. I felt sick. Let me guess. One of those names is mine. Sarah Elizabeth Chen. Flight to Bangkok, departing tomorrow at 6 p.m. I don't have a passport. Actually, you do. Applied for 6 months ago using your stolen identity. It was delivered to a P.O. box registered in your name. This was a nightmare. Marcus hadn't just been cheating on both of us, he'd been methodically building an escape route using our identities and Vivian's family's money. And somehow, I looked like I was in on it. Miss Chen, Agent Rodriguez said, pulling out handcuffs, I'm afraid we're going to have to take you in for questioning after all. Wait. Charles stepped forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Agent Rodriguez, you can't arrest her based on circumstantial evidence of identity theft. We're not arresting her, Rodriguez clarified, though the handcuffs suggested otherwise. We're taking her in for protective custody while we sort this out. Miss Chen, if you're truly a victim here, being in federal custody might be the safest place for you right now. Safest? I squeaked. What do you mean safest? Rodriguez exchanged a look with his partner. Miss Chen, when people steal $2 million from organized crime figures, there are usually consequences. The blood drained from my face. Organized crime? The Morrison family trust isn't just old money, Rodriguez said quietly. Some of those funds have complicated origins. People who don't take kindly to being robbed. Vivian's mother had gone completely white. Agent Rodriguez, surely you're not suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything, ma'am. I'm stating facts. Your family's business associates include some very serious people. And when they discover their money has been stolen and funneled through Miss Chen's identity, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This wasn't even just about fraud. Marcus had painted a target on my back using my own identity. He knew, I whispered. He knew exactly what he was doing. My phone rang again. Same number. Marcus calling from jail. Answer it, Rodriguez said suddenly. But put it on speaker. We need to hear what he says. With trembling fingers, I accepted the call. Sarah. Baby, thank God. Listen to me very carefully. His voice was strained, desperate. Nothing like the cocky tone he'd used when he told me to prove I loved him. I'm not your baby, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I'm apparently your identity theft victim. Sarah, please. I can explain everything. But first, you need to get out of there. Right now. Get out of where? Away from the feds. Away from the Morrisons. You're in danger. Rodriguez was frantically signaling other agents. They were tracing the call. Danger from who, Marcus? From your victims? Or from whoever's money you actually stole? Both, he said, and the raw fear in his voice made my stomach clench. Sarah, I never meant for you to get caught up in this. The identity stuff, I was trying to protect you. Protect me? You stole my identity. I created you an exit strategy. The passport, the accounts, the house in Portland, it was all supposed to be your escape route if everything went sideways. My escape route from what? From them. Marcus's voice cracked. From the people whose money I borrowed. Sarah, they think you're my partner. They think you helped plan everything. The world went cold. What people, Marcus? Just run, Sarah. Don't trust anyone. Not the feds, not the Morrisons, not. The line went dead. Rodriguez was already on his radio, barking orders in rapid-fire code words. Other agents were scanning the crowd, hands moving toward their weapons. What's happening? Vivian demanded. We need to evacuate this area. Now. Rodriguez grabbed my arm. Miss Chen, you're coming with us immediately. Why? What did he mean about not trusting anyone? Because, Rodriguez said grimly, we just lost contact with the agents guarding Mr. Whitfield. And the money he stole? It belongs to people who don't call lawyers when they want their property back. The sound of squealing tires came from the parking lot. Rodriguez pushed me behind a pillar. Everyone down. Now. This wasn't a wedding anymore. It wasn't even just a fraud case. It was about to become a crime scene. The next few minutes were chaos. Guests screaming, diving behind tables, the crash of breaking china as people fled. But the squealing tires turned out to be wedding vendors arriving late, not armed criminals. False alarm, Rodriguez announced, but he kept his grip on my arm. We're still leaving. Now. As federal agents escorted me toward their vehicles, I caught sight of Vivian standing in her destroyed wedding dress, mascara streaking down her cheeks. For a moment, our eyes met. I'm sorry, I called out. I never knew. I know, she said quietly. We were both his victims. The investigation took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of depositions, polygraph tests, and living in protective custody while the FBI untangled Marcus's web of lies. It turned out Marcus had been running cons since college, starting small with credit card fraud and working his way up to elaborate relationship scams. I wasn't his first victim, I was just his most useful one, thanks to my clean credit history and trusting nature. The organized crime angle was mostly Marcus's desperate attempt to scare me into running, though the Morrison family's wealth did come with some unsavory connections. Nothing that threatened my life, thankfully. Marcus had stolen $2.3 million total, using a combination of Vivian's trust fund access and credit lines opened in my name. The passport, the airline tickets, the house in Portland, all part of an elaborate escape plan that would have left both Vivian and me holding the bag while he disappeared to a non-extradition country. When I finally testified at his sentencing hearing, Marcus looked nothing like the competent man who told me to prove my love. Prison had aged him. His expensive haircut had grown out, revealing gray roots. His designer suit had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit. Your Honor, I said when given the chance to speak, the defendant asked me to prove I loved him. What I proved instead was that I loved myself enough to seek the truth, even when it hurt. Marcus got 12 years for fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. The restitution process was complicated, but Charles Ashworth, who'd become an unexpected ally, helped navigate it. Most of Vivian's family money was recovered. The debts in my name were cleared, though rebuilding my credit would take time. 3 months after the trial, I got an unexpected text from Vivian. Coffee? I have something that belongs to you. We met at a small cafe in downtown Portland. She looked different, healthier somehow, without the weight of Marcus's manipulation. I found these in the stuff the FBI returned, she said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside were printed copies of text messages, ones Marcus had deleted from my phone but apparently kept on his laptop. Messages where he'd written to friends about how easy I was to manipulate. How he was playing the long game with both of us. But also messages I'd never seen, where he'd admitted to someone that he actually did care about me, which was why his plan was getting complicated. I don't know why I thought you'd want to see those, Vivian said. Maybe because they prove you weren't stupid for believing in him. He was just very good at lying. Thank you, I said, and meant it. We talked for 2 hours. About trust, about healing, about the weird sisterhood of surviving the same sociopath. When I got home that evening, I looked at myself in the mirror, really looked, for the first time in months. Marcus had demanded I prove my love. Instead, I'd proven my strength. And that was worth more than any wedding I could have ruined.